This lesson is about microevolution. That is, how a species can change and adapt to different environmental conditions. One of the things that we need to understand as we look at the factors that contribute to these changes within a species is something called allele frequency. Allele frequency has to do with the frequency of a certain trait. So sometimes a gene can take one of two forms. In this case, it could take the black form or the brown form. So if the mouse has two of those alleles, like two black, it's going to have black fur. If it has two brown, it's going to have brown fur. If it has one of each, it's the dominant trait that's going to show up, in this case, the black one. But the frequency of that segment of DNA, that's what's important, because as that frequency of the brown allele increases, more the mice will be brown. As the frequency of the brown allele decreases, fewer mice will be brown. And what we're going to see is that through breeding and different factors, the frequency of alleles can change, and that's what's going to actually change the population. So here are 5 different ways that a population can change. One has to do with mutation, the other gene flow, non-random mating, genetic drift, and natural selection. We'll look at each of these in turn. The first has to do with mutations. Mutations can occur at the chromosome level or at the DNA level. At the chromosome level, you can have mutations like duplication, where in this case you notice that the B is being duplicated, or deletion, where we're removing one of those. In this case, the B is being removed. Inversion, where they're flip-flopping, they're switching, or translocation, they're moving from one place to another. All of those mutations can change the allele frequency. Another mutation could happen within the DNA sequence. So in this case, you have the original sequence, but we insert or substitute or delete a nucleotide, and as a result, things dramatically change. So in the case of the substitution, we're just switching one for another. But in the case of the insertion or the deletion, everything after that mutation is dramatically disrupted. And as a result, they can be have like really dramatic changes on the DNA and how that DNA gets expressed. The next thing is gene flow. That is just transferring genes from one group to another group, from one population to another population. So in this case, the blue butterfly flutters over to the orange butterfly population. They're able to breed, and as a result, the blue butterfly passes on its blue genes. It's blue genes. Non-random mating just means that rather than just mating with the next organism that comes by the same species, there's going to be something that prevents that mating from occurring. So sometimes that could be isolation factors, like in this case, geographic isolation, where the beetles in the one population can't mate with the beetles in the other population anymore. So it's not random. They can only mate with this one. You can see that the beetles in the top population are becoming more green, while the beetles in the bottom population become more brown. Another type of isolation might be behavioral isolation. So in this case, certain behaviors are attractive to certain birds, so it's non-random. Like the females won't just mate with anybody, the males just won't mate with any bird. There's certain behavioral traits that they're looking for, so it's non-random. Again, like color kind of matters. Sometimes it's the brightest, colors that get to mate, or the biggest or strongest of the animals that get to mate. It's non-random in that case. Genetic drift has to do with some kind of catastrophe. Like a founder effect is one example, bottleneck effect is another. Founder effect just means, like, we'll go back to our butterfly population, like a few butterflies get blown to an island and they start a new population. Well, you'll notice that new population doesn't have the white alleles. So without that population of butterflies is going to be dramatically different than the original population. Those 3 butterflies were the founders of a new butterfly population. That's going to be a little bit different because the allele frequencies are different. Another way something similar could happen is bottleneck effect. In this case, some disaster like a storm, a mudslide, a forest fire wipes out the population. It's the few survivors that then breed and they pass on their unique genes. So in this case, you'll notice that it was only the recessive genes that survived the bottleneck, whatever it is that decimated the population. And so the population is different after that event. The final one is natural selection. Natural selection is just this idea that there's variety and then there's some selection pressure. So here we have a variety of giraffe necks, but the selection pressure is going to be food. So the giraffes with the adaptation of the longest necks are going to be able to get food, whereas the giraffes with the shorter necks are not going to be able to get the food they need to survive. Another example might be the coat color in mice. So here we have a variety in the population. There's the gray mice and the white mice. The hawk can easily pick out the white mice. So by removing the white mice, they're removing that allele from the population. There's fewer of those genes that are expressed and more of the mice then have the gray fur color. So that's the idea of natural selection. There's variety in the population, but then there's some selection pressure. So it could be something makes it difficult to survive. Those that survive then are able to pass on their genes. So that could take several different forms. One, you could have directional selection where the pressure is driving the population in a direction. So in this case, toward darker fur coats. Or you could have disruptive or diversifying selection where it's the light coats and the dark coats that are fine, but the middle colors, those are the ones that are selected against. In other words, the pressure is removing them from the population. Stabilizing selection means if you're in the middle of the road, that's where you want to be. The ones on the end, they're the ones that are getting eaten, and those alleles are being removed from the population. So consider those 5 different things that can change or dramatically change a population. That's microevolution, sometimes speciation, but the idea is that the population is changing, and these are some reasons why.